So now we need to tell OpenSpending what's what in your dataset. We do this by creating a model. Just before we do, we'll quickly revise the structure of our data. Head account and head account description relate to the same entity. This is important and we need to tell OpenSpending to group them together in the next step. Same thing for subaccount and subaccount description. Then we have year, reporting type, amount, and further each line is classified as to whether it's revenue or expenditure, or recurrent or investment, as well as a council name, and we don't have anything in expense type, so we don't have to worry about that. So now we go back to OpenSpending and click Add Dimension. Let's start by adding a dimension for head account. We'll talk a bit later about the difference between dimensions and attributes, but just to give you a quick overview, let's look at OpenSpending. And if you delve right down to the most granular level of the data, you'll come to an info page which will show you both dimensions and attributes. So for example, dimensions are things, entities, such as groups or functions, whereas attributes, if you scroll down, you can see Bemerkungen. That's a description. It's obviously not a thing in itself, but you can add the information to the individual line item by making it an attribute. So we type in the name of our dimension, select dimension, and hit the green button. So on the next page we have to tell OpenSpending which columns relate to the dimension that you're adding. We can add an ID column and also a description column, and that will tell OpenSpending that they both relate to the same thing. Let's go and do the same thing for subaccount. Type subaccount, select dimension, and add the dimension. And we do the same here. Don't worry too much about the type fields. Generally, if you have a column which relates to an identification number or something like that for a department, it will be an ID. And if you have a description, it will be a string. So now we're going to input our date. So select date, and it will automatically fill the name column with time. Click Add, and go and select the year. Now we're going to do the same for the amount column. So type in amount, and amounts are measures. So select the radio button for measure, and then click Add. So we're going to add our final dimension before we move on to the attributes. A council is a thing, which makes it a dimension. And you can see that in this particular case, one column is both the ID and the label, so they're both the same. So now we add the attributes. Remember, these are things which we use to describe or flag each line item, whereas dimensions were entities such as departments, budget programs, organisations, or accounts. Typically, attributes will only have a few defined values, such as here, where we contrast recurrent against investment, and those are the only two possible values for data in that column. Otherwise, attributes might be a description or comments field, as we saw earlier. The rest of the attributes are very similar, so we'll just whiz through those really quickly. Our final step is to set the unique dimensions. In principle, every dataset needs to have a column or a combination of columns which represent a unique ID. This is used to check whether part of a dataset, for example a monthly update, hasn't been loaded twice, and for generating a unique URL for each entry. In practice, you can just add a line number to the end of each CSV line, but we don't have that here. So we're going to select a combination of columns whose data will always be unique when combined. So that's it, we're done. All you need to do is hit Save Dimensions. You'll be shepherded back to a dashboard. And you can test your model by testing a sample of the data, which won't load all of it, just enough to tell you whether your models work. Hit Refresh to see whether your model has worked. And if you get the message completed with 0 errors, you're ready to go and load the full dataset. Depending on how big your dataset is, leave it running for a little while and then hit Refresh again. And if it says complete, then it worked and you're ready to move on to making visualizations. If not, check our error reporting guide to see where to go next.